Hello guys, welcome back to Rajasmeka. It's Marco here, and today we talk again about advanced color theory and how to tackle any project with the mindset of a true artist. I must reveal a dark, terrible secret. This channel was not created to help you become better painters. This channel was created to help me become a better painter. The fact that we are improving is just a side effect. I know, it sounds like a joke for the introduction, but yeah, it's more or less the truth.
I'm a firm supporter of the Feynman technique, a learning model based on the idea of conveying information using concise thoughts and simple language, where you explain the concept you're learning to an imaginary, or in this case even better, a real audience, to find gaps in your knowledge, fill those gaps, and internalize the subject in the process.
All my old videos about color theory have been made following this need to consciously explain and recap to myself the chaotic cloud of knowledge I've accumulated on the subject. And after almost 2 years, I think the whole series needs a good update and reboot, and of course new episodes. And not only because I have overcome my crippling fear of the camera. The channel is the mirror of the linear evolution of my painting, and you know that every video is connected in some way to the others because I'm literally building new stuff over the old stuff week by week. And since from now on I plan to tackle more and more advanced projects, I feel the need of a new theoretical milestone that I can use as base reference for the new videos.
What I'm trying to say is that for this week I plan to show you how to paint a bust. But in the middle of the work, I realized that to make my choices understandable, I needed to touch so much theoretical stuff that this video sprouted from that one by itself.
All the ideas you can find in the playlist up here are still absolutely valid, extremely solid and really useful if you are a beginner, or new to the channel, but I think they are a bit too compartmentalized for where we are now, and almost too mathematically tight. You'll see what I mean. Don't forget to drop a like to boost the spread of this video, and check my Patreon page because this is a great example of what I do behind the scenes for my Patreons. And of course, that's the best way to support my work in general. Thanks a million, guys!
I used to plan my models starting from the basic rules of color schemes and color harmonies, basing all my choices on the safety net of knowing, for example, that a split complementary color scheme is always well balanced and fairly striking, or that an analogous scheme delivers a tight look and a precisely defined mood.
These universal rules of composition objectively deliver results and quick solutions to army painting problems, but this mathematical system that at the beginning helped me moving the first steps around the color wheel soon became like quicksand, limiting my movements, choices and the more artistic aspirations. Only at this point, and after a serious amount of research into other media, I've realized that proper painters still having always in mind these ideas, and not that I stopped calling them rules, use them as simple tools to perfect their vision, and not as the final product. So my new, more holistic take on the subjects of color theory and painting in general is less based on rules and technicalities, and more based on the idea that every model is the character of a story. And when I paint a model, I'm taking a snapshot of the story, blocking it in a single dramatic shot.
Since we are working in a visual medium, the best way to visualize this moment frozen in time is the screenshot of a movie frame, the cover or a single panel of a comic book, or simply a cool illustration from an art book, a battle tome, or just the internet. Imagine this story like a character's background in a roleplay game. You need it to give depth to his past, and to his reasons to be an adventurer, to give weight to his choices, and value to his journey and growth.
If you move this idea to painting, you get a similar kind of depth, answering the classic questions needed by any kind of storytelling. Who is the character? What is he doing? What is he thinking? Where is the scene taking place? What time of the day is it? What season? What about the weather? The more questions you ask and answer, the better. At the first glance, this can seem trivial, a self-contained intellectual exercise, or a romantic dramatization of the simple process of painting a little plastic toy. But accepting this idea as foundation for every other step is a total game changer for the practical work. The idea of painting to tell a story is already well rooted in the mind of advanced painters, but in the optic of the real movements of hand and brush, I mean almost the opposite. Use a story to know what to do and how to do it. Stuffing the story with a ton of details, you get a more and more precise mental image of the final look of the model, your visual goals and their needs, creating a very precise map for every stage of the work that will answer all your questions and solve your doubts from the very first brushstrokes. And all this without limiting your imagination.
Let's take this model for example. I've imagined a tropical scene under the fiery summer light of an equatorial sun. In the early afternoon, a veteran, lonely shark pirate comes out from the lush forest in the background, and now is standing on the shore, contemplating the sea and his next move. With just a few lines, I'm sure you have already in mind a strong and defined image of how he will look like. And this happened even if I didn't talk about the intrinsic colors of his skin and outfit. The great thing is that these few lines are not only an ideal goal, but they tell me precisely what to do in practice from the very beginning. The hour, in this case early afternoon, tells me that the angle of my airbrush and spray will be the angle of the sun after the zenith at noon, so something between 70 and 45 degrees. The fact that we are in a clear summer day tells me that the light will be direct and powerful, with a strong and sharp impact on the raised volumes. So, more pushing and pulling on the trigger, and more opaque white paint in the central parts, generating similar strong sharp shadows in the opposite angles. And when I'll move to colors, it will inform me of the tone of that light, because summer light on a tropical island is incredibly different from the winter light on a glacier. But we'll talk better about this later. Again, this is just a layer of white over the black primer, but what I consider the most important elements are already here, set in the first minutes of work.
And this is the second pillar of my revised take on painting, coming from a better study of 2D illustration and comics. Contrast values and using these tools to model the volumes, creating a better illusion of scale and dramatic presence, become my first and main concern, and colors move to kind of a secondary place.
Does it really matter if this Batman will be colored in the classic grey and blue scheme, or the cinematic full black? That's for sure a new level of information and storytelling, but the core information is still in pencils and inking. The illusion of volume and depth is already here, in the modeling of shapes and values, and the use of positive and negative space, making this Batman. I find this even easier to understand in the work of someone like Mike Mignola. He is a master of colors, using simple, well-studied, striking tones to move and focus your attention in the right spots, and add powerful symbolic meanings to every little element of a panel. But it's the work in black and white to make the heavy lifting, and even in the finished product, black is the main tone on the page. This is still a strong Hellboy, even without the iconic red. In a similar way, this non-metallic metal is already quite believable, even without colors. And the simple shapes in this arm take direct and bouncing lights, and project shadows, like a much bigger block of cylinders and spheres, like a more realistic arm.
Working on the value scale in a stage totally removed from colors, I can better focus my attention and energy on contrast and volumes, without the misdirection and the optical illusions created by colors.
It's easy to believe that you have a lot of contrast because maybe you are opposing two striking complementary tones. But if you turn them in black and white, they are almost identical, with basically no value contrast at all. This obviously doesn't happen working in black and white.
Now we can start talking about colors. But of course, not in the way we usually do it. In miniatures, we are obsessed with color schemes. But most of the time, we simplify and trivialize this aspect into what is just the outfit of the model. That is the less interesting part.
The problem of color schemes is easy to crack. Take the model of an established color harmony and you have all your answers. Here is the classic equidistant triad based on the traditional primaries blue, red and yellow. Take blue as your primary and most diffuse tone, yellow as secondary hue, and use red as localized accent, and you have one of the most iconic schemes of Warhammer 40k. Or, for what it matters, Superman. Simply switching in the equation the roles and proportions of yellow and red. Move again the ratio of the same three basic flat choices, and you get Iron Man. Or a Blood Angel. This is simple visual math on the color wheel, and you can do it with almost infinite permutations, simply spinning the spin wheel and adjusting the ratios.
Boring! This is boring!
But this is exciting. Same simple outfit with the same classic internal scheme, but different environmental lights make the scheme completely different in every artwork. Highlights, shadows, midtones and mood are interesting and completely different, not because of the scheme, but because of the environmental light. And this is where the story that you create for the model becomes again the key. Because to properly set this ultramarine in the middle of an exploding battlefield, or in the snow, or in a creepy Necron tomb planet, every single color of your palette must be different, and influenced by the specific environmental light of your choice. And you need to know this stuff from the very beginning to create something coherent and again exciting.
These examples are of course striking extreme situations, but still, this idea is not something only for advanced or more artistic pieces. This is something you should incorporate even in your gaming models, and you can already see a ton of these examples in my recent videos. How many times have you found yourself asking, and you sure ask me very often in the comments, what color can I use for the lights? What colors can I use in the shadows? The answer is that it can be any color. This totally depends on your story, your setting, or to oversimplify the concept for a gaming point of view, on your bases.
If your ultramarine is standing in a desert, the lights will probably tend to warm, yellow and orangey tones, and your shadows should look colder, because of the relative absence of that direct, warm contribution. In the same way, here everything is filtered by a soft pitch light, making the deeper shadows a more solid cold blue. But, to make it even easier to understand, check these lights here. The blue is not simply a lighter blue, but it moves into green, then yellow and pale warm white, because of its optical mixing with the tone and intensity of the yellow sun. And the red, exposed to a cold bouncing light coming from sky and clouds, become desaturated. Then a proper light blue in the highlights. For sure, not the kind of highlights we usually use for red. And to simplify this idea and shock the system even more, here is the same white wall under different lights. In this optic, the basetones of the scheme lose a lot of importance, becoming mostly a stepping stone for the evolution into thematic lights and shadows.
The environmental light obviously works in conjunction with the basestone of the scheme, because they are the base. But you can clearly see who the real protagonist is, and source of visual interest, real chromatic contrast and drama. This awareness makes you jump from the mindset of a kid saying that the sky is blue and grass is green, to the one of an artist that sees the mind-blowing complexity of hues running through a single blade of grass. This seems like a lot of stuff to digest, and for sure every major point has a ton of sub-chapters that I'm still exploring and I want to expand with you in future videos. But to recap, the key main steps of my present approach on painting are just four. Story, never been more important. Value sketch or fully finished grisaille, a speed painting trick evolved into my main source of value, contrast, volumetric information and scale. A quick deviation on base colors, and then a deep dive into environmental light and mood. With this introduction and ideal roadmap in place, I hope to make every new video a bit easier to follow and understand, having at the same time more space and time to better investigate the subchapters and the specific challenges of every new model, without having to explain the baselines and the basic reasons of my process every time. Of course, don't count on the fact that I will not change my mind and point of view in a few months. This is color theory, so open to a variety of interpretations. And at the end, that's the beauty of the artistic process. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe. Remember that you can ask me anything down below with a comment, and you can follow my projects during the week using one of my socials. And if you want to support my work, check my Patreon page and join the community, or maybe ask for a commission. See you next week, guys!